This is what I like to paint. This is a park down in southeast Iowa, and I come here quite often. Kathy and I, we like to travel quite a bit. We go for long drives, is what we call them. Sometimes as long as 3 weeks. We've hit a lot of the national parks. Sometimes we get lucky, we get to photograph the animals. Most of the animals I get are in zoos. I like to go to zoos a lot and take the pictures there. But being out in nature is what's really important to me, especially later in my life here. I've come to appreciate it much more. That's why I do a lot of animals. I like to do the landscapes of the natural areas. But most of it I photograph, and then I do the paintings at home. It just works better with watercolor. It's difficult to regulate the drying of the paper. I do a lot of watercolors. I've started embellishing my watercolors many times with colored pencil and a lot of times with just ink. And I've started doing a lot of colored pencils, which will be in my show too. I'll have some colored pencils. I'll have a mixture of all of them in the show. But that's basically what I like to do. This is my setup for my painting. I use the kitchen counter. I've got my computer with all my pictures on it. I usually have a sketchbook. I paint on a board, and this is for the quarter sheets. And with the quarter sheets, I've got an old tackle box that I bought many years ago. I open it up. It's got a couple of lips here. I put the board on the tackle box and I paint. For my water, I've got an old dog dish, which works great because I've got dirty water in one and clean water in the other, and I have a sponge. So they go on the counter too. I've got my palette with my colors, and I keep brushes right along with me. And here's the painting I'm going to work on today. It's a painting of Jay Cook State Park in Minnesota. And before I start, I usually do a drawing. I don't do too careful of a drawing. I want it to be my impression of the area. I don't want a photograph. I've already got a photograph. So the way I'll start out is I'll wet the paper completely and I'll put it back on the board after it dries, just enough to get rid of the shine, and that's when I'll start painting. Okay, I've wet the paper and gotten the shine off of it. So usually what I will do is I will start with the sky. Some different blues, whatever. I usually want to leave something for the clouds. And what I want to do is I want these different. These are the same right now, so maybe I'll come in a little bit more on that side. Maybe I'll just touch a little bit here. And I'll usually wet my brush and soften these edges somewhat. Clouds are made of water, so they're pretty soft. So, and I might leave some hard edges, but in this case it looks like I'm not leaving much. So anyway, one of the things you have to realize when you're painting, your colors are going to dry a lot lighter. So maybe I'll just get a little bit more blue here and there. Maybe I will even warm it up with a little burnt sienna in a place or two. Touch that up, clean the brush, touch it up. Maybe throw in a little bit more blue here and there. And just let the paper and water and paint make the clouds. So anyway, now while that's drying, I will come down. There's rocks down here. I will start on the rocks. I'm probably going to have those similar colors. Maybe they're kind of a purplish. I'll mix up some purple by mixing a red and a blue. Again, I'll mix in some other blues. Maybe some other reds. And I'll just let that run and do its own thing. I like letting the colors mix themselves when I paint. So I will come in here, try to cover up as much as I can. And that, come back in, different blues, a lot of variety. Try to make your painting more interesting. Maybe I'll come in with a little bit of brown, the burnt sienna again. And again, like I say there, this will dry a little bit lighter. But just to try to make it a little more interesting. We've got rocks over on this side too. I'm coming in with just blue right now. And it comes up to about there. Maybe I'll come in a little bit my red. Maybe I'll even go up a little bit higher. Like I say, I'm not trying to do a photograph. I want a painting. And this goes down about like so. I'll come in, I'll get some more blues. There's a rock. And this rock juts out a little bit. I'll touch that up there. There's a rock. This is several rocks together. And you don't have to be that careful. Nobody's going to know what shape your rock is. There's a little bit of red in there, a little bit of variety. Maybe some red up there. Change those shapes around a little bit. And that's a good start. Right there at this point, I'll let it dry for a little bit. Okay, now I've dried the paper, and the paint is fairly warm to the touch, so I'll be able to paint over that. But now I want to get the trees in the background. I will use some warmer colors, some yellows, maybe mix up a little bit of red with that. And I'll try to vary that a little bit. I'll mix in a little muddy color along with the bright colors. Maybe a little raw sienna. Just make different shapes, a little bit of red here. Maybe red would go right here. My center of interest is going to be here more, so maybe I'll, just to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit bigger red spot in that area. And again, just let the paint do its own thing, and I'll go right up to the rocks. I'll probably put a line there to define the rocks, and that's a good start. I will put in a little bit stronger colors, just kind of random things like you would see from a distance with their trees. Now a little green, there's still green in the background. So I just suggest some things, and when you're doing the trees, you want to vary the distances, vary the colors everywhere. So I'm kind of liking this, and maybe I'll put in a little bit. I'll need some darks, so I'll put in a darker green. I usually mix my greens. Maybe something a little bit darker in here, a little bit there. Come over this way, maybe up in there, maybe over here. Maybe something a little bit brighter over that way. Again, just let the painting do its own thing. I'll pick up a little of the excess water so it doesn't run everywhere. And for right now, I kind of like that. So I might start in with some of the shadow shapes on the rocks. And I'll dry this and I'll get back to that. Okay, I've put in some shadow shapes in the rocks using the same techniques that I did with the original rocks, but a little darker. These are just the primary shadows. And later on I'll put in some much darker darks to show the rocks better. But right now I want to put in some tree shapes to define the trees a little bit. I'll start with some of the pine trees. I'll mix some dark green along with some burnt umber, and I will start a tree here, I guess. Just suggest the tree. He's going to go completely out of the picture, I guess. And maybe another one right here, a little bit smaller. And I just do kind of random shapes. There's no set way of doing trees. Maybe another one over here. Maybe this one goes down a little bit further. Just for variety. Then I'll go back and I'm going to touch some of that with just a clean brush, just to blend it in just a little bit. Clean that brush in between. And maybe go in with a little bit more dark. I'll throw in some Prussian blue and actually even a little alizarin crimson for the darks, and just touch into those trees just a little bit, just to give them some more shadow shapes. Again, I'll let the paint decide where it wants to go. Okay, now maybe I'll just touch that a little bit more if I don't like what's happening. Maybe we'll put in a few dark shapes here and there, vary this. And again, I like to come in with a little bit of clean water, just to lose some of those edges. Let your imagination tell you what's actually behind there, because I don't want to show everything. I want the viewer participate in the painting, not to, otherwise I would have been a photographer. Maybe a little bit more dark red right in there, just to suggest trees and leaves, and maybe a little bit more dark right in there, maybe a touch there. And maybe I'll just make a little bit of mud and put in some shadow shapes here and there. And if I want to define it a little bit better, I can do that later. I can come in. But for right now, I just want to hint at what's there. Now, I want to put in some real dark edges to define these rocks further. And so I've mixed up a bunch of dark, and I will start putting some of these darks in the rocks to define the rock. And I will soften some of those edges, hopefully not too late. And maybe just even put a little water on them to vary their darkness. Maybe this goes like that. I can define rocks with that too. Those two are too much the same. We'll change that. And I'm going to just darken that a little bit. Maybe this goes here and shows up there a little bit. And I'm going to soften some places a little bit more, so I don't just have lines everywhere. I want shapes. Maybe that, and just to show that, maybe I'll use a little bit more color. It's starting to look like just black. I'm not crazy about that. Maybe just touch it here and there. Just touch here and there, and I want to go on to the rocks in the stream. They can be a little bit darker. If you're not happy with something, take some water and touch it in places. You don't want to scrub. And I will look at that for, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over here into some blue. And I might try to make that into, it was a puddle in the picture. So if I put a little blue in it, let's see what happens. I always experiment when I'm painting. And you never know what's going to happen. Touch that. Well, it's let me get a little bit more dark where the shadow is in the water. Okay, we'll leave that for now. Now this is my finished product. I'll have to look at it and I'll put it in a frame later on and see what it looks like there. But I've added more darks. I threw more dark and muddier colors up into the trees. I added some red to the rocks down below to give a little bit more unity to the overall painting, and I put a little bit more dark into the sky and a little more dark into the water. But other than that, it's close to finished. I might touch it up later on, but that's my interpretation of the rapids there at Jay Cook State Park.